You open the freezer and grab a pizza. It feels like nothing. A cardboard box, a plastic wrapper, a little frost around the edges. Maybe it is a Tuesday night outside Cleveland, a college apartment in Tempe, a Costco freezer in suburban Dallas. You pull it out, preheat the oven, and keep moving through the evening. You do not think about the temperature. That is the miracle. You do not think about the plant where it was made, the blast freezer that hardened it, the refrigerated warehouse that held it, the reefer trailer that carried it, the loading dock, the grocery back room, the freezer case, the compressor humming behind the store, or the worker who noticed a door was not sealing right before an entire pallet softened. You see dinner. The system sees strawberries collapse. Ice cream melts. Vaccines lose potency. Insulin needs protection. Eggs, yogurt, cheese, deli meat, bagged salad, seafood, poultry, and refrigerated medicine all live inside a narrow agreement with temperature. Break that agreement, and the product is no longer the same product. That is the first truth of everything that follows. Food is always moving toward decay. The system is simply holding it back. This is the cold chain. Not a single refrigerator, a chain. A continuous, invisible line of temperature control stretching from farms, factories, dairies, slaughterhouses, seafood docks, and vaccine plants, through warehouses and trucks and stores and pharmacies, all the way into the small cold box in your kitchen. Cold is infrastructure. Like all infrastructure, you mostly notice it only when it fails. Walk through the automatic doors of an American supermarket on a Saturday afternoon, and it feels bright, familiar, almost boring. Produce misting lettuce like a little indoor weather system. Yogurt walls. Meat cases. Frozen aisles. Ice cream doors fogging when someone holds them open too long. You probably think of it as a place where food waits. It is actually a temperature theater. A single building in which dozens of different foods are being held in dozens of different states of slowed time. Produce is cooled but not frozen. Milk is refrigerated. Meat is chilled to a colder point. Frozen vegetables are held below freezing. Ice cream, they are the visible edge of a mechanical system running every second, constantly pulling heat away from food so the food can pretend not to age. Behind the dairy wall is a walk-in cooler. Behind the meat counter, another controlled room. Behind the frozen aisle, a machinery of compressors, condensers, coils, refrigerant lines, alarms, and sensors, watched over by technicians who know that the temperature is not just a number. It is the line between sellable inventory and expensive garbage. And if that system fails, the illusion breaks fast. A power outage in a clothing store is an inconvenience. The shirts simply wait. A power outage in a grocery store is a countdown, because time immediately begins eating the inventory. Managers start thinking in minutes. Which cases are warming? How long have they been out of range? What can be moved to back? Inside, the staff is staring at thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, of dollars of food sliding toward the moment it stops being food and becomes risk. And that is just one store, on one bad afternoon. Have you ever lost an entire fridge or freezer of food to a power outage? What did it actually cost you? Leave your answer in the comments. It did not always work this way. For most of human history, keeping food was local, seasonal, and fragile. People dried it, salted it, smoked it, fermented it, canned it, buried it, and packed it in ice. And that ice was itself a heavy, melting industry. In the early 1800s, a Bostonian named Frederick Tudor built a fortune on a strange idea: cutting ice from frozen New England ponds in winter and shipping it, packed in sawdust. By the middle of the century, the trade was enormous. In a single year, Boston shipped tens of thousands of tons of pond ice around the world, and at any given moment, millions of tons sat stored in ice houses across the country. Ice was cut by horse-drawn plows, hauled, shipped, delivered by wagon, and slid into wooden ice boxes in homes. Cold came in blocks. It melted. It had to be replaced. And crucially, that harvested ice, loaded into early refrigerated rail cars, is what first let the meat packers of Chicago slaughter animals in one place and sell the meat 1,000 miles away. Then machines replaced the ponds. Mechanical refrigeration meant cold no longer had to be carved from a frozen lake. It could be manufactured, anywhere, on demand. But the true revolution in the American cold chain came from one largely forgotten. In the 1930s, he solved the problem everyone else had failed at: a refrigeration unit rugged enough to hold its temperature on a moving truck. He patented it, co-founded the company that became Thermo King, and during the Second World War, his units carried not just food, but blood and medicine to troops overseas. He would earn dozens of refrigeration patents, and decades after his death, a posthumous National Medal of Technology. Put his invention together with the interstate highways, and you get the country we live in now. Suddenly, a family in Minnesota could eat California strawberries in winter. A restaurant in landlocked Denver could serve fish from an ocean 1,000 miles away. The very idea of a seasonal food began to dissolve. This is not just food history. It is geography rewritten by cold. You have seen Jones's descendants on the interstate thousands of times without thinking about them. A white trailer with a refrigeration unit mounted above the cab line, a carrier, a Thermo King, sometimes with frost near the doors, moving through Arizona heat or Pennsylvania snow. Most drivers see a truck. The cold chain sees a moving refrigerator, a controlled climate fighting the outside world at 70 miles an hour. And here is the part people get wrong. The job is not always to make things colder. The job is to hold the right temperature. In August across Texas, the unit fights the heat. In January across Minnesota, it may have to protect chilled produce from freezing solid. Frozen ice cream, fresh meat, cool but not frozen lettuce, flowers, chocolate. The driver has to understand that the load is, in a sense, alive. Even when nothing in it is breathing, time and temperature are working on it continuously. So if the unit fails, a clock starts. The driver may have to pull over, call dispatch, hunt for service, and pray the temperature holds long enough. Because a broken refrigeration unit is not just a mechanical headache, it is a threat to the cargo's very identity. Ice cream that melts and refreezes is still, technically, ice cream. But it has changed. And that points to the strangest rule in this entire world. With almost everything else you buy, the object in front of you is the whole story. With refrigerated goods, it is not. The history of the object matters as much as the object, because cold chain damage is usually invisible. Medicine cooked by a few hours of heat can appear completely intact and have quietly lost its potency. The harm leaves no mark you can see, so the system has to remember what the eye cannot. Every reefer, every warehouse, every case carries temperature logs, sensors, and alarms, building a record of where the product has been and how warm it got and for how long. What was its temperature yesterday? Was there an excursion? Did someone catch the alert? Was the door left open? Did the trailer pre-cool before loading? This is genuinely unusual. A product can look fine, smell fine, feel properly cold again, and still be rejected because its past disqualifies it. In the cold chain, the object is not enough. The story of the object is part of the product, and that is why so much of this work is not about cold. Before any of that food reaches a store, much of it waits in places most people will never enter: cold storage warehouses. From the outside, one looks like any other big box near an interstate: dock doors, parked trailers, a security gate. Inside, the building holds a climate that does not belong to the region around it. A freezer room can sit below zero year-round, in any state, in any season. Workers move through it in insulated gear, gloves, and hats, their breath fogging, driving forklifts down aisles of pallets stacked to the ceiling. Doors open and close fast, because every opening is an energy event, an invitation to the heat. America does not store its food only in stores and homes. Frozen meat, seafood, vegetables, ice cream, juice concentrate, ingredients waiting for factories, inventory waiting for grocery chains. The freezer aisle begins long before the freezer aisle, in enormous rooms where cold is not a feature of the building. Cold is the building. And holding cold at that scale is a constant, expensive fight with physics, because heat always wants in. It demands energy, insulation, refrigerant, fans, compressors, defrost cycles, and backup plans. In some deep freeze facilities, the ground beneath the floor has to be actively protected, or it will slowly freeze, expand, and heave the building upward from below. And the single most dangerous moment in the whole warehouse is the one that looks the most routine: the loading dock. When a trailer backs in and the doors open, which is the real secret of this entire system. We call it a chain not because it is strong, but because it is made of links. And every link is a place it can break. Farm to processor, processor to warehouse, warehouse to truck, truck to store, store backroom to display case. And every single one of those handoffs is a moment when temperature can drift. The cold itself, sitting still in a sealed room, is the easy part. The danger lives in the transitions, in the seam between two systems, in the pallet staged a little too long on a warm dock, in the case stocked by someone in a hurry, in the trailer that was not pre-cooled before it was loaded. The forward journey of a perishable item is really a series of brief, vulnerable. A cold chain cannot, because at every seam the clock is running, and time is the one thing the whole machine exists to hold back. And here is something the system would rather not admit. The chain does not actually end at the store. It ends with you. At the checkout, the official supply chain hands the cargo to its least trained, least monitored carrier, the customer. Picture a family buying milk, chicken, frozen waffles, ice cream, and strawberries at 4:30 on a July afternoon. Then they stop for gas. Then they pick up a kid from practice. Then they sit in traffic. The groceries are in the trunk, and in Phoenix or Houston, the inside of a parked car becomes an oven in minutes. The frozen items soften. The refrigerated items warm. The ice cream becomes a quiet test of distance and planning. That forgotten grocery bag, then the food reaches the final cold room in the entire national architecture, the refrigerator in your kitchen. We treat it like a shelf that happens to be cold. It is actually food safety equipment. Federal guidance defines a danger zone between roughly 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, the range in which bacteria multiply fastest, and your refrigerator exists to keep food below it. Yet people overload it so the air cannot circulate, leave the door hanging open, trust their nose over the clock, and ignore a power outage until the softened ice cream becomes the evidence. The home fridge is exactly where a vast, disciplined national system meets ordinary human behavior. And human behavior can still break the chain in the final 6 feet. Cold does not exist on its own. It has to be produced, continuously, by machines, paid for in electricity and diesel. Which means the cold chain is really an energy chain wearing a different name. And you discover that the instant the power goes out. When a hurricane hits the Gulf, when a winter storm drops the grid in Texas, when a summer blackout rolls through a city, the first worries are shelter and safety. But very quickly, refrigerators turn into clocks. How long has it been out? Don't open the freezer. Is the food still safe? Can the store run on generators? Can the pharmacy keep the medicine cold? A blackout turns every refrigerator in its reach into an hourglass, the cold leaking quietly out the moment the machine stops fighting for it. And in that moment, An ancient technology comes back. It is a small melting reserve of the cold the grid made before the crisis, carried forward into the crisis itself. It keeps the insulin colder. It saves some of the food. It makes the heat survivable for one more day. The humble bag of ice outside a gas station, so ordinary that no one calls it infrastructure, is one of the most underrated pieces of American emergency equipment there is. The same block of ice solution Frederick Tudor sold 2 centuries ago, suddenly essential again the instant the modern machine goes dark. So far, this has mostly been about food. But the cold chain's highest stakes are not in the freezer aisle. They are in medicine. Insulin is commonly labeled to be kept refrigerated, roughly between 36, and this is where the invisible damage of the cold chain becomes most dangerous. Because a spoiled strawberry eventually announces itself, but a compromised medicine does not. The vial looks identical. The box looks fine. The liquid looks clear. But if its temperature history went wrong somewhere along the line, it may simply no longer work, with nothing to warn the patient or the pharmacist. That is why the pharmaceutical cold chain is a world of relentless documentation. Monitors, alarms, backup power, validated packaging, ice packs, dry ice, specialized carriers, chain of custody records. The small refrigerator humming behind the pharmacy counter is just the visible tip of a medical temperature system that stretches back to the factory. And it is why, after a disaster, people worry not only. Here the cold chain stops being about convenience or even abundance. It becomes, quite literally, a life chain. A thread of cold running all the way from a factory into a human body. Even when the cold chain does not fail outright, small lapses leave their fingerprints. Take that pint of ice cream again. It is unusually sensitive to temperature swings. Let it warm and refreeze even once, and the tiny ice crystals inside grow larger. The texture turns grainy. The mouthfeel changes. It is still perfectly safe, still cold, but the experience has been quietly degraded. The same is true across the chilled and frozen world. Temperature abuse can change the texture of fish, the moisture of meat, the crispness of produce, the shelf life of nearly everything. And the customer usually cannot name what the product failed quietly, and what actually broke was not just quality, but trust. That quiet, untraceable failure, the slow erosion of confidence that the food will be what it promises, is exactly what the whole expensive machine exists to prevent. Different foods demand different kinds of cold, and each tells its own story. Meat is one of the chain's most unforgiving categories. The modern meat case simply cannot exist without continuous refrigeration. Cold is what allowed slaughter and consumption to separate across hundreds of miles and weeks of time. What turned meat from something local and seasonal into an industrial product moving through a national system. That package of chicken breasts in a suburban store is not just food. It is industrial timing. A piece of fish in a restaurant in a landlocked city may have crossed oceans, airports, docks, cold rooms, and trucks to get there. Its freshness not a romantic idea, but a logistics achievement. Sushi in the middle of the country is, in a sense, a cold chain boast, a claim that distance has been temporarily defeated by temperature. And produce is alive in yet another way. Fruits and vegetables keep respiring after harvest, losing moisture, ripening, decaying, demanding precise humidity and airflow and cooling. A bagged salad looks like the simplest thing in the store, but pre-washed greens are among the most temperature-sensitive foods you can buy, depending on unbroken cold from field to fridge. This is why the produce section is a daily performance. Employees rotating stock, misting greens, culling the bad items, and why grocers simply accept it can never abolish it. It buys time. It does not defeat biology. Step out of the grocery store and into a restaurant, and the cold chain takes on a different kind of urgency. The dining room may be warm, polished, and atmospheric, but behind the kitchen doors, cold storage is survival. Walk-in coolers, walk-in freezers, reach-in refrigerators, and the low refrigerated drawers under the prep stations. Ice machines, thermometers everywhere, delivery schedules, labeling, first in, first out rotation, raw meat held apart from ready-to-eat food, sauces cooled correctly, prep kept below the danger line. A busy American restaurant depends on cold every bit as much as it depends on heat. The grill is the part you can see. The walk-in cooler is the quiet foundation. The morning then begins not with prep, but with triage. How warm did it get, and for how long? What can be saved, and what has to be thrown out? Can the lunch shift even happen? Can a technician get there in time? A restaurant can lose thousands of dollars in spoiled product before a single customer sits down. The public sees a handwritten "Closed today" sign on the door. The staff sees a ruined walk-in, a frantic morning, and a day collapsing because one compressor quit in the dark. Cold is not a detail of the restaurant business. Cold is whether the restaurant opens at all. Now go back and stand in front of the freezer aisle for a moment, because it is one of the strangest inventions in modern grocery culture, and one of the most quietly powerful. Pizza, dinners, vegetables, ice cream, waffles, breakfast sandwiches, fruit. The freezer changed domestic life because it changed planning. Before it, cooking meant working from fresh ingredients that were always racing towards spoilage. You bought for the next day or two, and you cooked, or you lost it. The freezer let households do something genuinely new: borrow from the future. You could store next week's meals today. You could buy in bulk and beat the price. You could keep emergency food against a snowstorm, turn an exhausting Tuesday into a pizza night with almost no labor, and stop letting the calendar dictate the menu. Frozen food is mocked as the home of the processed and the lazy, but it is also one of the most effective time management tools ever installed in an ordinary kitchen. At a Costco or a Sam's Club, the cold chain becomes almost domestic industrial. Families load minivans with giant packs of meat, cases of frozen berries, tubs of ice cream, and trays of food sized for a restaurant. Then drive them home to their own private cold infrastructure. The second refrigerator in the garage, the chest freezer in the basement. Bulk buying is not only a price strategy, it is a storage strategy, and it only works because the household has become a tiny node in the national cold chain. That humble garage freezer, full of Costco salmon and frozen pizzas and freezer-burned mysteries, is the last private warehouse in the entire system, plugged into the grid, the supply chain, and a deep American confidence that the electricity will simply keep running. It is easy to laugh at. It is also infrastructure, sitting between a household with a large refrigerator, a second freezer in the garage, a car, and a full supermarket nearby experiences cold completely differently from one without those things. A home with an unreliable fridge, a neighborhood with no full grocery store, a person carrying cold groceries home on a bus, a family whose power has been shut off. Because reliable cold is not just a technology, it is a form of security. If you can store food safely, you can buy more at once and more cheaply. If you can freeze leftovers, you waste less. If you have backup power, you can ride out an outage without losing everything in the fridge. If you have a stable home, you can plan around the cold you control. The cold chain helps America eat, but its benefits land unevenly. Advanced logistics on one side of a city, and households that cannot keep a refrigerator full on the other. A full refrigerator, in the end, is not only food. It is stability you can see when you open the door. None of this is free, and not only in dollars. The cold chain is one of the most energy-hungry systems in the entire food world. It runs on electricity and diesel around the clock. It depends on refrigerants, some of which are potent greenhouse gases if they leak. And there is a genuine tension built into its heart. Refrigeration exists to prevent food from being wasted, yet refrigeration itself carries a real environmental cost. And when the cold chain, the United States already wastes something on the order of a third or more of its food supply. And broken cold is one of the quiet ways abundance turns into garbage. A softened pallet, a warmed case, a failed warehouse system multiplying loss at every scale. So the real goal is not simply more cold, it is smarter cold, better insulation, more efficient compressors, cleaner refrigerants, tighter monitoring, less waste. Because cold is expensive, but spoilage is expensive too, and the hidden machine is always balancing the two. Once you start noticing the cold chain, you start hearing it. The hum of the refrigerator in a quiet kitchen at night. The low roar behind a supermarket. The vibration of compressors on a grocery roof. The engine-like growl of a reefer unit at a rest stop. The clatter of an ice machine dropping a new bag. Every compressor, in its own mechanical way, is saying the same thing over and over. Not yet. Not yet to spoilage. Not yet to decay. Not yet to the heat that is always pressing in. The cold chain does not stop nature. It cannot. It only delays it. And that delay, it turns out, is one of the hidden foundations of modern life. Delay is what lets food travel across a continent. Delay is what lets cities grow far from farms. Delay lets a hospital store its medicine, a supermarket promise its abundance, a household keep its leftovers, a family eat fresh fish 1,000 miles from the sea. We have built an entire civilization on the simple, expensive, relentless act of telling decay, not yet, not today, not until after you've eaten. It is tempting to picture all of this as machinery, compressors, sensors, refrigerant. There are the warehouse workers who spend entire shifts inside artificial winter, in parkas and gloves, driving forklifts through aisles where the air itself is a condition of employment, the cold working steadily on their hands and feet and concentration. There are the grocery clerks stocking frozen cases before the store opens, the truck drivers watching a temperature gauge through the night, the restaurant cooks checking a walk-in at dawn, the pharmacy staff logging a refrigerator reading by hand. And above all, there are the refrigeration technicians, the hidden doctors of the cold chain, who climb onto blazing rooftops in July, crawl into mechanical rooms behind grocery stores, and work against a clock where every minute of downtime has a dollar value measured in spoiling inventory. Picture the moment that the manager moves down the aisles, deciding which cases are still cold and which are warming. Employees keep the doors shut and wave customers away from the freezers. Someone watches the meat case temperature climb. Someone calls maintenance. Someone starts the hard arithmetic of what must be discarded and what can be documented and saved. Because no one wants to throw away a truckload of food, but selling food with an unknown temperature history is not an option. And then a technician arrives, finds the failed component, and brings the system back before the loss becomes catastrophic. To the customer outside, it was just a dark store for an afternoon. To the people inside, it was the cold chain nearly breaking, and a handful of workers holding it together. That is the hidden dignity of this work. It protects. Like all maintenance, its finest results are things that do not occur, and so the people who produce them stay as invisible as the cold itself. So imagine America without that delay for a single week, not without food, just without reliable refrigeration. The freezer aisles fail first. The meat cases turn dangerous. Milk cannot travel far. Seafood becomes local or vanishes. Restaurants shrink their menus. School cafeterias struggle. Pharmacies and hospitals scramble to protect medicine, and ice becomes precious again. The diet of an entire country would change almost overnight, and the abundance we call normal would suddenly reveal itself for what it actually is. Not a natural condition, but a temperature achievement, maintained every. A berry display in January, a cold soda at a gas station in July, A vial of insulin kept potent across 1,000 miles. None of these are natural. They are maintained conditions. Somewhere, someone loaded the pallet, checked the temperature, repaired the compressor on a hot roof, drove through the night watching a gauge, stocked the case before the doors opened, and threw out good-looking product because its history said they had to. Like all maintenance, the best results of their work are non-events. No outbreak, no spoiled shelf, no melted load, no ruined medicine, nothing for anyone to notice. The food is simply there. The ice cream is still ice cream. The insulin still works. So return, one last time, to your kitchen. The freezer door opens, cold air spills out, but that small cold box is the last room in a vast national architecture of cold. Connected to farms and factories, to warehouses below zero, to reefers crossing state lines, to pharmacies and hospitals and ports and the power grid, to technicians and night shift workers and sensors you will never see. You close the door. Somewhere, a refrigerated truck is crossing into the next state. Somewhere, a worker in a parka is moving pallets through a freezer room. Somewhere, a technician is climbing onto a roof to revive the machine that keeps a dairy wall alive. And the cold chain is doing what it always does, holding back time, quietly, expensively, imperfectly, constantly. If it works, you will not call it a miracle. You will call it dinner. And tonight, behind the freezer door, the hidden machine is still running.